We need assistance, whether it be ex gratia payment now and compensation later, but we need some form of payment for what has been taken away from our lives, and not just our lives, our families' lives. It's not just me affected, it's everyone in my family was affected. My intermediate family, my son, my daughter, my wife, my brothers, my sisters, everyone was affected in some way. Obviously not as bad as myself, but everyone gets infected by this. And we can't help them, but we can help me, and then I can help my wife and my family.
I think so too. And we have we also perhaps have a need for counselling, at least to have the potential of it for our relatives, don't we? Do you feel that the potential for care for your relatives as well would be important?
Most definitely, Charles. Look, the last few months after what I've just been through, I don't know how I managed to stay on top of it, to be honest. Obviously, the support of my family was huge, but just the things that go through your head when you're told that you're basically near the end of your life, and that is not through your fault. This is someone else's fault who hasn't acknowledged that still. And so when you ask me what I want, yes, I talk about compensation, but I also want the truth. I want to find out what happened. I want to make people aware that we have some people in this world who do things that they shouldn't do, and if those people aren't brought out, then they'll continue to do it, and it'll happen again.
Yeah,
it's not just haemophilia that we're trying to bring out here. It's like this could be autistic people, it could be diabetics, it could be any group of people in the world that something like this happens to. We're talking about haemophiliacs, but it can happen. If they get away with it with this, they can do it to the next group and to the next group.
exactly. And also, what about just from the point of due diligence? What went wrong? What can we improve on? We need to know this, and I think that's why we need to have also a legal inquiry. Okay, now, Greg, last points. Have you got any message, anything you'd like to say to either the lawyers in the UK or to Lynn Kelly?
I'd just like to say thank you for all your assistance and anything you may be able to offer us in the future. And the fact of the matter is, we're not going away. I feel fortunate that I'm a survivor, and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And we're not going to stop. If the day comes that we can't go any further, then we'll just have to make some kind of a statement that the world remembers.
I agree. We're not going to allow Australian families, 1,750 Australian haemophilia families, to be treated worse than other countries. That just recently, the blood products manufacturer CSL, in response to you, and for the first time in my knowledge, said that this was a global tragedy. Well, if that's the case, we don't believe it was a tragedy so much as it was a failure and a scandal. But if that is the case, why is it Australians are not being helped? Right now, we've got haemophiliacs being helped in Ireland, in Scotland, in Wales, in England, as they should be. But why not in Australia? What is it that's different for Australian haemophiliacs?
When you're being told in 1974 and reports right up till 1979, Judith Poole, who made the cryoprecipitate, the first batches of cryoprecipitate, she warned them in 1974 that any components, freeze-dried components with large batch numbers, was just going to be too risky. And like I said, more reports right up to 79 warned them that any change of product from cryoprecipitate to mass pooled products was going to carry huge risks with it. And yet, for some reason, they continued to make it, and even after they knew it was contaminated, they continued to sell it. Then they started to ask those people who were infected to come back and donate blood so they could turn it into more bad products.
Incredible. That's something we did in Australia.
If we think about it now, Charles, what we're hearing now is they're looking for COVID people who have survived COVID, and they want their plasma.
That's right.
What's going to come of that?
Right, and so what you're talking about is a period in 1990 where authorities in Australia said, oh, well, one of the excuses they've used with the high rate of haemophilia infection is, well, we didn't have advanced screening measures. This is something they said in an article that you were featured in just a week ago. And our position on that is, what a load of nonsense, because it was actually, they had a laissez-faire attitude to donors, for example. I mean, I've read evidence that they were encouraging homosexuals to donate and use the blood supply as a cheap and discreet test for syphilis and hepatitis.
If I can make it, if you make a soup and then you want to test, did anyone put peas in that soup? But you put peas in that soup. What is the point of testing? What is the point of advanced testing? What is the point of anything? I already know those peas are in that soup, but I'm still going to give it to you. Exactly.
This is such a good point. Well, that was brilliant, Greg. Absolutely brilliant. Now, what do you think about the fact that your product that infected you with hepatitis C was not recalled, and yet in 1991, Commonwealth Serum Laboratories arranged legal indemnities from government for all of the hepatitis C and HIV infections, but you were never warned by them. What do you think that was about?
It's like we're England's little brother or something or other. Everything that happened over there seemed to get transferred down here 4 or 5 years later. So obviously when the UK became aware of the need for indemnity, Australia became aware of the need for indemnity. When UK became aware it was infected, Australia kept using it for years later. You're telling me England didn't tell them? Is that what the case is, that England didn't inform Australia this product that we've given you for the process of?
A fabulous point, because it's my understanding that in the UK, they had the British plasma laboratories that weren't able to keep up with the sort of demand that was required. And so that led to them importing these American blood products, which were unheat treated and taken from the worst.
They have no records for.
Yes.
CSL has no records of imports.
That's right. We've got evidence that there may have been a mixing of plasma into our supply. Haemophiliacs were told that the Australian supply was self-sufficient, and that their blood products had been derived from voluntary source donors. So what we now find, though, is that while they were boasting about the safety of a voluntary donation system, they were actually encouraging people with viruses to donate blood. For example, in the early 80s, they were encouraging homosexuals with syphilis and with hepatitis fears to use the blood supply as a discreet way to test that. And that blood would then be sent down to Commonwealth Serum Laboratories. Then in 1990, when they made proud boasts about how they were screening the whole blood supply for hepatitis C, when they found a donor was infected with hepatitis C, they didn't allow that whole blood to go off to a hospital to be infused into, say, a surgical patient or an accident patient. But they instead took that blood, separated it, and sent it to Commonwealth Serum Laboratories to be made into factor VIII for haemophiliacs. And this is a period throughout 1990 where they did this. I think it said to go for about 8 months.
I'd just like to say that, you know, anyone overseas, globally, anyone can offer any help to us. We are really on our own down here. It seems that maybe because we're so far away, no one ever listens to us. But if you guys could just stand up and be our voice until we're able to be our own voice, we'd much appreciated.
Greg, can I just say that's absolutely fantastic what you just said, because, you know, Australian haemophiliacs, we've had 1,750 haemophilia families in Australia who copped contaminated blood. Just recently, this is what stunned me, the Haemophilia Foundation of Australia, for the first time in their history, I think certainly for 30 years, just produced a comprehensive report that for the first time gave us national figures and on how many people were infected. And from those national figures, which for some reason took 30 years to get delivered, we're now able to ascertain, Greg, you and I ascertain that there's less than 200 surviving haemophiliacs who were hit by contaminated blood in the 1970s and the 1980s. So basically, by making us wait and wait and wait and wait for a chance to get help, they've killed everybody off. We've now just got 200 people. So we're absolutely desperate. We don't get any of the financial assistance. Haemophiliacs don't get any of the financial assistance that they get in the UK. What would you say to your sort of haemophilia, if you want to say your haemophilia brothers and sisters or whatever overseas, in places like the UK? We're desperate because, you know, these are basically our last moments in terms of trying to get help. What would you say to them? What could they do for us right now to help?
Well, again, it's just the voice we need. People will listen when they know we're there to talk, but we're not being given any opportunity to talk. In Australia, the media, for some reason, just doesn't believe it's a story, and when they do write something on it, it's like a good guy story. It's not a good guy, bad guy. They say, you know, they give the incorrect answers from CSL and from Red Cross or from the government, and people just seem to accept those answers, and those answers are not true. They're lies.
I noticed in your recent article, they said that they seemed to infer that it was because of a lack of advanced screening that led to your infection. And I rebelled, and I told the newspaper that screening had nothing to do with the infections down here. What had to do with their infections was criminal negligence, because they were aware of the contamination, but then did not want to apply heat treatment and various other viral inactivation techniques from as early as the early 1980s because of increased costs and drops in yield. Now, that company, Commonwealth Serum Laboratories, were privatised and indemnified in 1994. They've gone on to become Australia's biggest company. They've gone on to become the darlings of the stock market and the darlings of our Australian media, because here we have, Australia has a kind of Apple of healthcare. We've created a kind of Apple company, this CSL company. Greg, do you think that because Australia and the media have witnessed this CSL company from when they were privatised in 94 to being this $140 billion Goliath, do you think it's because CSL is so powerful and so loved here by the media that prevents journalists and the media from talking about the haemophilia scandal that claimed so far 1,400 haemophilia lives?
I believe CSL, the Red Cross, the government have all been underhanded and are all still acting in that way to make sure this doesn't come out. Every time we get to run down a channel, it gets blocked. Everything we try to do, every story, every report just gets blocked or put away. Or, you know, you'd expect that when a journalist takes your story and, you know, is excited about running that story, that there would be, you know, they would do a bit of investigation themselves, but they don't. They just write your story, put it in the paper, and that's the end of it. We don't have no one wants to follow anything up down here, and that's for a reason, because they're not allowed to follow anything up.
This
is why comes to a dead end.
This is why when I was able to provide a statement to the UK Infected Blood Inquiry, I did so on behalf of haemophiliacs who've been completely abandoned. That was my intention, is to try and expose and show the fact that haemophiliacs were infected by the worst possible policies on blood, and that some of these have been influenced by British blood bankers. And that, you know, basically an Australian life is worth every bit as much as a British one. And that's why we have to have Australian haemophilia families, first of all, immediately access financial assistance, just like they are in the UK. We need